3 days before they buried her, my grandmother slipped a manila envelope into my hands and whispered, "When Vanessa calls you a charity case at the funeral, just smile. You will understand everything on Tuesday." I thought she was confused from the morphine. I thought the cancer had finally reached the part of her brain that remembered things clearly. I tucked that envelope into my purse and forgot about it for 72 hours, which turned out to be the most important 72 hours of my entire life. My name is Sutton Bruler, and I am 34 years old. I work as a night shift charge nurse at a hospital in Akron, Ohio, the same city where I was born in 1991, the same city where my grandmother raised me on weekends because my parents were always too busy with my older sister to remember they had 2 daughters. I have lived in the same one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat for the last 6 years. I drive a 2009 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield. I owe $47,000 in nursing school loans. And until the Tuesday I am about to tell you about, my own mother introduced me at parties as her other daughter, the one who is still figuring things out. The funeral was on a Saturday in early March of 2025. The ground was still half frozen, and the cemetery workers had to use a small heater to soften the dirt around the plot. I stood at the back of the gathering in a black coat that I had borrowed from a coworker because my own coat had a stain on the lapel that would not come out no matter how many times I scrubbed it. Vanessa stood at the front, of course, right next to the casket, wearing a designer black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was crying in that performative way she had perfected as a child, the kind of crying that involves a lot of shoulder shaking but very few actual tears. My grandmother of mine was named Alina Bruler, and she was 87 years old when the pancreatic cancer finally took her. She had built a small empire from nothing. She started with a single bakery in 1968 on the east side of Akron, then opened a second one, then a third, and by the time she was 60, she owned a 40% stake in a regional chain of specialty food stores that spread across 3 states. She was the toughest woman I have ever known. She used to say that softness was a luxury for people who had never been hungry, and she had been very, very hungry as a child. After the priest finished speaking, the family gathered at the reception hall my parents had rented for the after service. I was standing by the coffee station, trying to disappear into the wallpaper, when Vanessa walked up to me with a plate of crackers and that smile she always wore when she was about to twist a knife. "Sutton, sweetie," she said, loud enough for the people around us to hear. "I just wanted to let you know that you do not need to come to the will reading on Tuesday. Mom and Dad and I talked, and we think it would be easier on everyone if you just stayed home. You know, less awkward." I looked at her. I did not say anything. "I mean, let us be honest," she continued, picking a piece of cheese off her plate. "Grandma helped you out a lot when you were younger, paid for your textbooks, gave you that car, covered your rent that one year. You have already gotten your share. You are basically the family charity case at this point. There is nothing left for you in that will, and I do not want you to embarrass yourself by showing up expecting something." I felt my mother step up beside us. I waited for her to say something, anything. She nodded. She actually nodded. My father, standing 3 feet away with a plate of finger sandwiches, looked down at the carpet and pretended to examine his shoes. "Charity case?" Vanessa repeated, savoring the words like she had been practicing them in front of a mirror. "That is what you are, and there is nothing wrong with that, but Tuesday is for actual heirs." I remembered the envelope in my purse. I remembered the whisper of my grandmother. I remembered the way she had squeezed my hand on her last lucid afternoon and said, "Promise me you will be there, baby girl. Promise me you will not let them scare you away." I smiled. I do not know where it came from, but I smiled, and Vanessa flinched a little because she had been expecting tears or anger or some kind of crumble that she could feed on later at dinner parties. "I will be there," I said quietly. I promised her. "Suit yourself," Vanessa said with a shrug, walking away. "Just do not cry when you walk out with nothing." My mother lingered for a moment. She was 61 years old, a retired guidance counselor with frosted blonde hair and eyes that had not really looked at me with warmth since I was about 8 years old. She put her hand on my arm in a way that was supposed to look caring, but felt more like she was checking if I was solid. "Sutton, honey, Vanessa is just trying to spare your feelings," she said. Your grandmother loved you in her own way, but you have to be realistic about these things. Vanessa was the one who visited her every Sunday. Vanessa was the one who took her to her appointments. That was a lie, and we both knew it. I was the one who took her to her appointments. I was the one who sat with her through 3 rounds of chemotherapy. I was the one who held a bowl while she vomited, who washed her hair in the kitchen sink when she was too weak to stand in the shower, who slept on her couch for the last 6 weeks of her life because she did not want to die in a hospital. Vanessa had visited exactly 4 times in the last 2 years, and 3 of those visits were because she needed to borrow money. But I did not argue. I had stopped arguing with my mother around the age of 22 when I realized that arguing with her was like arguing with a thermostat. She had been set to a certain temperature about me a long time ago, and nothing I did was going to change the reading. "Okay, Mom," I said, "I understand." She patted my arm and walked away, satisfied that she had performed her motherly duty for the afternoon. I left the reception about an hour later. I drove home in the slow Saturday traffic, and when I got back to my apartment above the laundromat, I sat on my bed and finally opened the manila envelope. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in the shaky but determined script of my grandmother. It said, "Sutton, my brave girl, there are 2 wills, the one they know about and the one they do not. On Tuesday, you will see the real one. The lawyer of the family is named Harold Pemberton, but he is not the lawyer of mine. My lawyer is named Margaret Chen, and she will be at the reading. Do not be late. Do not let your sister bully you out of your seat. Sit in the front row. Wear the pearl earrings I gave you for your 16th birthday. And when she screams, because she will scream, I want you to remember that I saw you. I saw every single thing they did to you, and I have spent the last 4 years making sure you would never have to be invisible again. I love you more than the moon, Grandma." I read it 3 times. Then I cried for about 2 hours, the kind of crying I had not let myself do in front of anyone since I was a little girl. Then I got up, washed my face, took out the pearl earrings from the small jewelry box on my dresser, and laid them on top of my black dress for Tuesday. I did not call my sister, I did not call my mother, I did not warn them. For the first time in my entire life, I was about to have a secret that they could not take away from me. Tuesday morning, I woke up at 5:45 without an alarm, the way I always do after a night shift even on my days off, my body still trained to the rhythm of the hospital. I made coffee in the same chipped mug my grandmother had given me when I moved into my apartment in 2019, a mug that said "World's Okayest Granddaughter" because she thought that was funny. I sat at my small kitchen table and stared at the manila envelope for a long time, the way you stare at a lottery ticket before you scratch it, half believing and half not. The will reading was scheduled for 10 in the morning at the offices of Pemberton and Associates, a small law firm in a converted Victorian house on West Market Street. I knew the place. My grandfather of mine, who had died when I was 12, had used the same firm, and Harold Pemberton had been the family lawyer for almost 40 years. He was a tall, thin man with white hair and the kind of permanent half-smile that made you feel like he was always agreeing with whoever had paid him last. I left the apartment at 9:15. The drive should have taken 20 minutes, but I gave myself extra time because I did not want to walk in flustered. I wanted to walk in calm. I wore the black dress I had laid out the night before, a simple cotton thing I had bought for a funeral 6 years earlier and worn twice since. I put in the pearl earrings. I brushed my hair and pulled it back into a low bun. I looked in the bathroom mirror for a moment, and I did not recognize the woman looking back. She looked older than 34. She looked tired, but she also looked, for the first time in a long time, like she was about to do something important. When I pulled into the parking lot at 9:40, Vanessa was already there. Of course she was. She was sitting in the driver's seat of her white BMW, which she had bought 2 years ago with what she claimed was a bonus from her job, but which I privately suspected had been a gift from our parents. She was on the phone, gesturing dramatically with one hand. When she saw me, she rolled down her window. "What are you doing here, Sut? I told you not to come." "Grandma asked me to," I said simply, and kept walking toward the building. "This is so embarrassing," I heard her say into the phone. She actually showed up, after everything I said. The reception area was small and smelled like furniture polish and old paper. A young woman with red glasses sat behind a desk and asked me my name. When I told her, she looked at her list, then looked up at me with a slightly different expression than the one she had started with. "Yes, Miss Bruler, please have a seat. Mr. Pemberton will be ready in a few minutes. There is also a Miss Chen waiting for you. She asked me to let her know when you arrived." "Miss Chen," Vanessa, who had just walked in behind me, said sharply. "Who is Miss Chen?" The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "She is a private attorney. She asked to be present for reading." Vanessa narrowed her eyes at me. "What did you do, Sut?" "I did not do anything," I said. "I just showed up, like Grandma asked." A door opened down the hallway, and a woman in her mid-40s stepped out. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit her perfectly, and her dark hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail. She had a leather briefcase in one hand and a tablet in the other. She walked straight to me and extended her hand. "You must be Sutton. I am Margaret Chen. Your grandmother and I have been working together for the last 4 years. I am so sorry for your loss. She talked about you constantly." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm but kind. "Thank you for being here." "This was her wish," she said. "Everything from this point forward is exactly as she planned it. Please try not to be nervous. Just stay in your seat, no matter what is said." Vanessa was watching us with an expression that I can only describe as the expression of someone who has just realized that the floor underneath her might not be the floor she thought it was. My parents arrived a few minutes later, my mother in a navy blue dress and my father in a gray suit that was a little tight around the middle. He had put on weight in the last year, mostly because my mother had decided that her retirement project was going to be cooking elaborate dinners and watching cooking shows. He nodded at me, but did not say anything. My mother gave me a tight smile. "Sutton, you came," she said, as if she had not expected me to take her seriously when she told me not to. "Yes, Mom, I came." "Well, do not say I did not warn you." We were led into a conference room with a long oval table. Harold Pemberton sat at the head of the table, with stacks of folders in front of him. Margaret Chen sat to his right. There were 5 other chairs. Vanessa sat directly across from Margaret, with my parents on either side of her, like she was a queen being flanked by her loyal subjects. I sat 1 seat down from Margaret on her side of the table. I was alone on my side. That was nothing new. There were a few other people in the room as well. My grandmother of mine had a younger brother, Uncle Roland, who was 81 and lived in Cleveland. He had driven down that morning. There was also a long-time employee of the family business, a woman named Delphine, who had managed the original bakery for almost 30 years. My grandmother had asked specifically that she be present. Harold Pemberton cleared his throat and began with the kind of speech that lawyers give at moments like this. He talked about my grandmother's long life, her many contributions to the community, the love she had for her family. He talked about how she had been a careful planner and had updated her estate plan many times over the years. I noticed that Margaret Chen was watching him with a very neutral expression, the kind of expression a person wears when they know something the other person does not. "Now," he said, opening a leather folder, "the most recent will I have on file was executed in March of 2021. It is a fairly straightforward document. The bulk of the estate, including the family home on Maplewood Drive, the bakery business assets, and the 40% stake in Carlson and Bruler Specialty Foods, is to be divided as follows. 70% to Vanessa Bruler Kowalski, the granddaughter. 20% to be held in trust for any future great-grandchildren. 5% to charitable organizations as listed. And 5% to be divided among other family members, including small bequests to Sutton Bruler, Roland Bruler, and Delphine Marchetti." Vanessa actually smiled. She did not even try to hide it. She looked across the table at me with a look that said, "I told you so." 5% of the residual estate, after deductions, comes out to approximately $7,000 for each of the smaller bequests. Pemberton continued. "Sutton, your bequest is $6,500. There is also a small box of personal items set aside for you. $6,500, after everything. After every weekend I had spent at her house. After every chemotherapy appointment. After every night on her couch." My mother reached over and patted my hand. "See, honey, she did not forget you completely. That is something. I did not move, I did not say anything, I just waited. Margaret Chen folded her hands on the table. Mr. Pemberton, she said politely, I appreciate you reading the 2021 document. However, I am here today as the attorney of record for Alina Bruler. The document you just read has been superseded. Pemberton stopped. He looked at her over the top of his glasses. Excuse me. There is a more recent will, Margaret said. Executed in October of 2024, 4 months before her death. It was witnessed, notarized, and filed in accordance with all applicable Ohio probate law. I have the original document here with me, along with the certificate of competency from her physician dated the same day, 2 video recordings of the signing, and the affidavits of the 3 witnesses. I believe you will find everything in order. The room went very, very quiet. You could have heard a paper clip drop in that conference room. My father shifted in his chair. My mother sat up very straight. Vanessa, who had been leaning back with the smug expression of a woman who had already mentally spent her inheritance, slowly leaned forward. What did you just say? Vanessa asked. Margaret Chen did not look at her. She kept her eyes on Harold Pemberton, who was now flipping through his own folder with a sudden urgency, as if he might find something in his papers that would make the last 30 seconds unhappen. A second will, Margaret repeated calmly. Or more accurately, a more recent will, which by Ohio law supersedes the earlier document. Alina was very clear with me about her wishes. She updated her estate plan completely in October of last year. She instructed me to remain silent about it until the formal reading, and to allow you, Mr. Pemberton, to present the older document first. She wanted the family to hear both. Why would she do that? My mother asked, her voice rising. Why would she have 2 lawyers and not tell us? Margaret finally turned her head. Because she did not trust you, she said simply. There was no malice in her voice. It was a statement of fact, the way a doctor might tell you that you have a fever. Her words, not mine. She believed that if certain members of the family knew about the changes she was making, there would be significant pressure put on her to undo them. She wanted to protect her final wishes, so she hired me independently, and she kept her process private. My mother turned bright red. My father looked at the table. This is ridiculous, Vanessa said, her voice already climbing. Grandma was sick. She was on medication. She did not know what she was doing. You probably tricked her, who even are you? Margaret reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. From the folder, she took a single sheet of paper and slid it across the table to Pemberton. This is the certificate of competency, signed by Dr. Anjali Subramaniam, geriatric specialist at the Cleveland Clinic. She evaluated Alina on October 14, 2024, the same day the will was signed. The certificate confirms that Alina was of sound mind, fully oriented, and capable of understanding the nature and consequences of her decisions. I also have 2 videos of the signing itself, in which Alina explains, in her own words, what she is doing and why. Would you like to begin with the document or with the videos? Pemberton picked up the certificate, examined it for a long moment, and then nodded slowly. The document is the legal instrument. We should begin with that. Margaret produced another folder, thicker this time, and laid it on the table. She did not pass it to Pemberton. She kept it in front of her. The document is 15 pages long. I will read the operative provisions and summarize the rest, as is standard practice. Are there any objections? Yes, there are objections, my mother snapped. We have not even seen this document. We do not know if it is real. You will receive certified copies before you leave today, Mrs. Bruler. Mr. Pemberton will also receive a copy for the firm of his. The original has been filed with the probate court this morning at 8 a.m. Everything is in order. She opened the folder. The last will and testament of Alina Margaret Bruler, executed on October 14, 2024, in Cuyahoga County, Ohio. I, Alina Margaret Bruler, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils made by me at any time heretofore. She paused, then looked up at us. Article 1. The family home located at 4218 Maplewood Drive, Akron, Ohio, including all furnishings, vehicles, and personal property contained therein. Vanessa was holding her breath. I could see her chest had stopped moving. This property, in its entirety, is bequeathed to one person. She paused for effect. I think she had practiced this. My grandmother of mine had probably told her exactly when to pause. To my granddaughter, Sut Eliner Bruler. Vanessa made a sound. It was not quite a word. It was something between a gasp and a laugh and a scream, all squashed together into a single noise. Article 2, Margaret continued, as if she had not heard the sound. My 40% ownership stake in Carlson and Bruler Specialty Foods, including all voting rights, dividend rights, and any associated business interests. She looked up again. To Sut Eliner Bruler. That is a lie, Vanessa shrieked. She stood up so fast that her chair fell backward and hit the floor. That is a lie, that is a lie, that is a lie. Article 3, Margaret continued, completely unfazed. My personal investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $1,200,000 as of the most recent statement, including all securities, bonds, and cash holdings. She did not even need to look up this time. To Sut Eliner Bruler. Vanessa was crying now, not the performance crying from the funeral, real, ugly, snotty crying. My mother was trying to grab her arm to pull her back into her seat, but Vanessa had her hands flat on the table and was leaning over it. You did this, she screamed at me. You manipulated her. You sat there with her every day and you whispered in her ear when she was dying. You stole this from me. You stole everything from me. I did not say anything. I had been told to stay in my seat, and I was staying in my seat. My hands were folded in my lap. My pearl earrings were warm against the sides of my neck. Article 4, Margaret said, raising her voice just slightly to be heard over the crying. The sum of $50,000 is bequeathed to Roland Bruler, my brother of mine. Uncle Roland nodded. He had not said a word the entire morning, but I could see a small smile under his white mustache. Article 5. The sum of $25,000 is bequeathed to Delphine Marchetti, my friend and longtime business partner. Delphine put a hand over her mouth. Article 6. The sum of $100,000 is to be divided equally among the following charitable organizations, as listed in Appendix A. She turned a page. Article 7. To my son, Daniel Bruler, and my daughter-in-law, Patricia Bruler, I leave the following. The sum of $1 each and a letter, which I have asked Miss Chen to deliver privately at the conclusion of these proceedings. I do this not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. They have made their choices about which of their daughters deserved their love, and I have made mine. My father made a sound like he had been punched in the stomach. He sat down hard, even though he was already sitting. My mother put both hands over her face. Article 8. To my granddaughter, Vanessa Marie Bruler Kowalski, I leave the following. The sum of $1 and the contents of the safety deposit box at Huntington Bank, box number 4471, the key to which has been provided to Miss Chen. The contents of that box are personal in nature, and Vanessa will understand their meaning when she sees them. Vanessa was just making a sound now, a long, low wail that did not sound human. This is fraud, my mother shouted. This is elder abuse. We will contest this. We will contest every word of it. Margaret closed the folder. You are welcome to contest it, Mrs. Bruler. However, you should be aware that Eliner anticipated this. She included a no-contest clause in this will, which states that any beneficiary who challenges the validity of the document forfeits any bequest they would have received. Since the bequests to you, your husband, and Vanessa are each $1, you have very little to lose financially by contesting. However, the document is airtight. 3 witnesses, full medical certification, video recording, and 4 years of preparation. You will not win. You will only spend money you do not have on lawyers who will tell you the same thing I am telling you now. She stood up and gathered her papers. I would like to play the first video now, she said. Eliner recorded this for the family. She wanted everyone to hear it from her, in her own voice. She pulled a tablet from her briefcase and set it up on a small stand at the end of the table. She tapped the screen, and the face of my grandmother appeared. My grandmother looked stronger in the video than I expected. It must have been recorded early on, before the cancer had taken too much from her. Her hair was still mostly silver and pulled back the way she always wore it. She was sitting in the green wingback chair in her living room, the one she used to read in for hours at a time. She was wearing the cream-colored sweater I had given her for Christmas in 2023. Her hands were folded in her lap. She looked directly at the camera. "Hello, family," she said. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, but still hers, still steady, still carrying that particular dry edge that meant she was about to say something she had been thinking about for a long time. "If you are watching this, then I am gone, and Margaret has just read you the will. I am sure you have questions. I am going to answer most of them right now, so you do not have to spend the rest of your lives wondering." She paused. She took a sip of water from a glass on the side table. "Daniel," she said, looking directly at my father, "you were a good boy. When you were small, you used to climb into my lap and ask me to read you the same book over and over again. You were sweet. You were gentle. I thought you were going to be the kind of man who treated his family well. I was wrong. Somewhere between 20 and 30, you decided that the easiest way to have peace in your marriage was to agree with everything your wife said, even when she was being cruel. I watched you do this for almost 35 years. I watched you watch your wife favor one daughter over the other so completely that the younger one stopped expecting anything at all. I waited for you to step in. You never did. I am leaving you $1, because that is what your spine has been worth to your daughters." My father made another one of those sounds. I had never heard him make sounds like that before. He was a quiet man, the kind who solved everything by going out to the garage and tinkering with a car engine for 3 hours. He had never been mean to me exactly. He had just not been there. And somehow, watching him receive this judgment from his mother, I felt something close to sadness for him. Not pity, just sadness. "Patricia," my grandmother continued, "I never liked you. I tried. For Daniel, I really did try. But you came into this family with a need to have a perfect daughter, and you decided very early on that Vanessa was going to be that daughter. You dressed her in matching outfits. You showed her off. You enrolled her in pageants when she was 4 years old. And when Sutton came along 3 years later, you treated her like a defect in the design. You criticized her hair, her weight, her shyness. You compared her to Vanessa at every opportunity. You called her your difficult one to your friends in front of her when she was 7 years old. I heard you. She heard you. I do not know if you remember it, but she does. I do." My mother was sobbing into her hands now, not loud, just deep, shuddering sobs. "I am also leaving you $1, Patricia, not because I want to hurt you, but because if I left you anything more, you would spend it on Vanessa, and the entire point of this will is to make sure that does not happen." My grandmother shifted in her chair. "Vanessa, my older granddaughter, I want you to listen very carefully now, because I am only going to say this once." The whole room was holding its breath. Even Vanessa had stopped wailing. She was staring at the screen with her mouth slightly open, like a child watching a magic trick that she did not quite believe. "You are 41 years old. You have spent your entire life believing that you are special. Your mother told you that you were special. Your father did not disagree. Your teachers told you that you were special because your mother volunteered at every school event and made sure they knew which student belonged to her. You grew up thinking the world was going to hand you things because you were beautiful and because you were her favorite. And for a long time, the world did hand you things because your parents made sure you got them." My grandmother leaned forward slightly. "You stole from me, Vanessa. In 2019, you stole $12,000 from my checking account using a check you wrote to yourself after I gave you my checkbook to pay one bill. I knew. I have known since the day after it happened. I did not say anything because I wanted to see how long you would go without confessing. It has now been almost 6 years. You have not confessed." Vanessa made a tiny squeaking sound. "In 2021, when I was hospitalized for the first time with the pancreatic issue, you came to visit me exactly once. You stayed for 11 minutes. I timed it. You asked me, while I was hooked up to N4, if I had updated my will recently and whether I had included you for the house. You did not ask me how I was feeling. You did not ask if I was scared. You asked about the house. I remembered that day. I had been there in the parking lot, picking up some things from the car when Vanessa walked out, already on her phone with her husband, complaining about how depressing the hospital smelled. In 2023, you told your mother, in a conversation that you did not know I overheard because I was in the next room of the house of yours that I was paying for, that you were going to put me in a nursing home as soon as I started becoming inconvenient. You used the word inconvenient, Vanessa. About me. The woman who paid for your wedding. The woman who paid off your first car. The woman who put $20,000 into your business idea that you abandoned after 8 months. Vanessa was shaking her head, slowly, back and forth, like she could shake the words out of the air. And in early 2024, when I was first diagnosed with the cancer that has now taken me, you sent a text message to your husband that said, and I quote, because Margaret has the screenshots, "Finally, we can start planning the renovations on Maplewood." You sent that message 4 hours after I told you the diagnosis. 4 hours. Vanessa was crying again, but it was a different kind of crying now. It was the kind of crying a person does when they realize that someone they thought was asleep had been awake the whole time, listening. I am leaving you $1, Vanessa. And I am leaving you the contents of Safety Deposit Box 4471, which contains every single receipt, screenshot, bank record, and document that I have collected on you over the last 6 years. It is a complete record. Margaret has copies. If you ever try to contest this will, or if you ever harass your sister of yours, those copies will become public. I want you to understand that this is not a threat. It is a fact. You have spent your life making sure that I saw the version of you that you wanted me to see. Now I am making sure that you see the version of you that I actually saw. My grandmother sat back in her chair. She looked tired now. She looked like a woman who had carried this speech for a long time and was glad to finally set it down. And now, Sutton. I felt my heart stop. My brave girl, baby of mine, I want you to listen very carefully because the next part of this video is for you and only for you. But I am going to say it in front of all of them because they need to hear it too. She looked directly into the camera. I could see her eyes. They were the same eyes I had looked into 1,000 times across her kitchen table. They were full of something that I had not really let myself believe was real until that very moment. It was love, pure, unconditional, fierce, protective love. The kind I had spent 34 years convinced was meant for other people, in other families, on television shows about lives I would never have. Sutton, she said, you were never the charity case. You were the only one in this family who never asked me for anything, and that is exactly why I am giving you everything. The video paused on its own at that moment. Margaret had clearly programmed it to stop there. She looked around the table calmly. Elena recorded a longer message for Sutton privately. We will play the rest of the public portion in a moment. First, I want to give the family a few minutes to process. Mr. Pemberton, would you like to take a short recess? Pemberton, who had not said a word since the second will had been announced, nodded vaguely. He looked like a man who had been hit by a slow-moving truck and was still trying to figure out what year it was. 10 minutes, he said. We will reconvene at 11. People started moving. My mother stood up and grabbed Vanessa by the arm, half pulling her toward the hallway. Vanessa was still crying, but she was also looking around the room now, calculating, the way she always did when she was trying to figure out who in the room might be on her side. She caught my eye as she passed me. She did not say anything. But the look she gave me was the kind of look that would have frightened me a week ago. It did not frighten me anymore. My father stayed at the table. He was looking at his hands. After a long moment, he looked up at me. Sutton, he said, his voice was rough. I did not know about a lot of it. You knew enough, Dad, I said quietly. You just decided it was easier not to know more. He did not argue. He just nodded slowly. He looked old to me in that moment, older than I had ever seen him. He was 63 years old, and he looked like a man who had just realized that he had spent his life being a passenger in his own family. I got up and walked to the small kitchen down the hall where there was a coffee machine. Margaret followed me a moment later. Are you doing okay? She asked. I do not know yet, I said. I think I am in shock. She nodded. She poured herself a cup of coffee and stood with me by the window that looked out at the parking lot. Outside, I could see my mother and Vanessa arguing in the parking lot. My mother was waving her hands. Vanessa was wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. They were not coming back inside, or at least not yet. Your grandmother of yours was one of the strongest clients I have ever worked with, Margaret said quietly. She came to me in 2020 after the first stroke. Do you remember that? The small one she had right after Thanksgiving. Yes. She told me that the stroke had made her realize that she did not have unlimited time and that there were things she had been avoiding for too long. She told me about your family. About you. She showed me pictures, actually. She kept this little album in her purse. There were maybe 20 pictures in it, and 17 of them were of you. I had to put my coffee down because my hands were shaking too much to hold it. She told me that she had stood by and watched your parents play favorites your whole life, and that she had tried for years to balance it out by being extra kind to you, by spending more time with you, by helping you with money for school. But she said that as she got older, she realized that what she had been doing was not actually helping. It was just making the imbalance survivable. It was not fixing it. Margaret took a sip of her coffee. She said that the only thing that would actually fix it was a clear, final, undeniable correction. Something that could not be argued with after she was gone. So we spent 4 years building it. Every document, every safeguard, every piece of evidence. She wanted to make sure that when this moment came, you would not just inherit money, you would inherit your standing. My standing. Your place in the family, your worth, the proof that you had always mattered, even when no one else acted like you did. She wanted the record to be set straight in front of everyone. She was very specific about that part. I started to cry then, not the heaving sobs from Saturday, just quiet tears that ran down my face without my permission. She loved you, Sutton. She did not just love you in the abstract way that grandmothers love grandchildren. She studied you. She paid attention to what you needed, and she made a plan. After a few minutes, I wiped my face and we walked back to the conference room. Pemberton was already back at the table. Uncle Roland was there too, and Delphine. My father had not moved. My mother and Vanessa had not returned. Should we wait for them? Pemberton asked. They have 10 minutes, Margaret said, looking at her watch. If they choose not to come back, that is their decision. The remainder of the proceedings will continue regardless. Exactly at 11, my mother walked back in, dragging Vanessa behind her. Vanessa looked like a different person now. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was a mess, and her eyes were red. But there was something else in her face too, a kind of hardness. The wheels were turning. I want it on the record, my mother said as she sat down, that this entire process is being disputed by the family. Noted, Margaret said. Although, as I mentioned, any contest will trigger the forfeiture clause. Please be advised again before you proceed. We do not need your advice. Very well, shall we continue with the video? She tapped the tablet and my grandmother appeared again. This time, the video continued from where it had stopped. Sutton, my grandmother said, I want to tell you about the day I knew. I sat very still. It was May of 2003. You were 12 years old. You had just won an award at school for an essay you wrote about your grandfather, the one of mine. You had spent weeks on that essay. You had interviewed me about him. You had cried when you wrote certain parts of it. You won the school of yours wide prize, and they had a ceremony, and your parents could not come because your sister had a dance recital that same day. I remembered. I remembered standing on that small stage in the school of mine cafeteria, holding a paper certificate, looking out at the audience and seeing 2 empty seats where my parents should have been. I was there, my grandmother said. Of course I was there. I drove 45 minutes to be there. And afterward, I took you for ice cream at that little place on Hawkins Avenue, and you ate a strawberry milkshake, and you tried to act like you did not care that they had not come. You said, and I will never forget this, you said, "It is okay, Grandma, they had to be there for Vanessa. She really needed them." You were 12 years old, and you were already making excuses for them, already telling yourself that your sister of yours needs were bigger than yours. I was crying again. I did not bother to hide it. That was the day I knew. I knew that if I did not do something, you were going to spend your entire life believing that you came second. And I made a promise to myself that day, sitting in that ice cream shop, watching you try to be brave, that I was going to spend the rest of my life proving you wrong. I started small. Little gifts, little compliments, little ways of letting you know that you were seen, but it was never enough, because they were louder than me. They were always louder than me. She paused. She looked tired in the video. But she also looked like she was finally getting to say something she had wanted to say for a very, very long time. This is the last thing I can do, Sutton. It is the loudest thing I will ever say. And I want you to hear me clearly, you are not the charity case. You never were. You are the best of us. You are the kindest, the most generous, the most patient. You are the one who came back. Even when they pushed you out, you came back. You came back for me, and I am coming back for you now, with everything I have. The video ended. The conference room was silent for a long time. Even Vanessa was quiet, although I suspected it was not because she was moved. It was because she was strategizing. Margaret closed the tablet and put it back in her briefcase. "There is one more matter to address before we conclude today's proceedings," she said. Elinor wanted Sutton to be aware of the structure of the inheritance from a practical standpoint. The estate is substantial. The total combined value, conservatively estimated, is approximately $4,200,000, not including the ongoing dividends from the 40% business stake, which average approximately $300,000 per year. I think I forgot how to breathe for a second. Vanessa made a sound like she had been slapped. "To prevent any pressure or manipulation from family members," Margaret continued, "Elinor established a structure in which the bulk of the inheritance will be held in a trust managed by an independent trustee for the first 3 years. Sutton will receive the family home and personal property immediately, full ownership of the business stake immediately, and a quarterly distribution from the trust to support her transition. After 3 years, full control of the trust assets will be transferred to her directly. This structure was designed specifically to protect her, not to limit her." "Protect her from what?" my mother snapped. Margaret looked at her with a small, polite smile. "From you, Mrs. Bruller. From any pressure to share, lend, or transfer the inheritance to other family members during the period when she might still be processing this transition." Elinor was very specific. She said, and I quote from her instructions to me, "My daughter-in-law will try to convince Sutton that family means sharing. She will frame it as morality. She will not stop until Sutton has given away enough to keep the peace. I am putting a wall around my granddaughter for 3 years so she has time to learn what peace actually feels like." End quote. My mother went completely still. "That is a terrible thing to say about me," she said quietly. "It is what your mother-in-law said about you, Mrs. Bruller. I am simply relaying it." There was nothing more to add. Pemberton closed his folders. Margaret stood up. "I will be in touch with Sutton this afternoon to begin the transfer process. Mr. Pemberton, I will email you certified copies of all documents within the hour. The family is, of course, free to seek independent counsel." Vanessa stood up. She walked around the table slowly. She did not come toward me. She walked to Margaret instead. "You think this is over," she said quietly. "You think this is just going to happen, and we are all going to walk away, and that little mouse over there gets to take everything our grandmother built. You do not know our family. You do not know me." "I know enough," Margaret said. Her voice did not change. "I know that you are 41 years old, that you have a husband who works in commercial insurance, and that you have $83,000 in credit card debt that you have been hiding from him. I know that your house is in foreclosure proceedings as of last month. I know that the bonus you told everyone you got 2 years ago was actually a loan from your grandmother. I know quite a bit, Mrs. Kowalski. Your grandmother of yours believed in being thorough." Vanessa did not respond. She walked out of the room. My mother grabbed her purse and followed. My father stayed in his chair for another moment, then stood up slowly. He came around the table to me. He stopped about 3 feet away. He did not try to touch me. "I am sorry, Sutton," he said. "I do not know if that means anything to you anymore, but I am." "It does not mean nothing, Dad," I said. "It just does not mean what it would have meant if you had said it 20 years ago." He nodded. He left. Uncle Roland came over and hugged me. He was a small man with bright blue eyes and a faint smell of pipe tobacco that I had loved since I was a little girl. "She talked about you all the time, baby girl," he said into the top of my head. "I am proud of you, and I am proud of her. She did the right thing." Delphine came over too. She was a tiny Italian woman in her late 60s, with silver hair and hands that had needed bread for 40 years. "Your grandmother of yours, she was a force," Delphine said. "And she saw you. I want you to know I saw you too. All those Sunday mornings when you would come in with her, before school started, before the bakery opened, you would help me set out the bread. You never asked for anything, you just helped. I always told her that one she is good, that one is the real thing. I hugged her. I had not known. I had not known that anyone outside of my grandmother had been watching. When everyone else had left, Margaret and I stood alone in the conference room. "What do I do now?" I asked her. She smiled, the first real smile I had seen from her all day. It made her look 10 years younger. "Now you go home, you sleep, you let it sink in. And tomorrow morning, you and I are going to sit down and start the process. There is no rush. The trust will continue to operate. The business will continue to pay dividends. The house is yours whenever you want to move in. Take your time. Your grandmother of yours wanted you to have time. That is the whole point." I drove home in a daze. I do not remember the drive. I remember pulling into the parking lot behind the laundromat. I remember climbing the stairs to my apartment. I remember sitting on my bed in the same black dress, with the pearl earrings still in my ears, for a very long time. My phone started ringing around 2 in the afternoon. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 2:15, and 2:30, and 3. At 3:45, she sent a text message. "Sutton, we need to talk, please. This is your family. Whatever your grandmother of yours thought she was doing, the truth is more complicated. There are things you do not understand. Please call me back. We can fix this if we work together." I read the message 3 times. Then I typed back, slowly, 4 words. "There is no we." I turned my phone off. I lay back on the bed. I stared at the ceiling. The crack in the plaster that I had been looking at for 6 years was still there, snaking from the corner above the closet down to the light fixture. I had stared at that crack on 1,000 bad nights. I had stared at it after the breakup with Marcus in 2018. I had stared at it after the worst night in the hospital, when we lost a patient that I had been sure we could save. I had stared at it on the night my grandmother of mine first told me she had cancer. The crack was still there, but everything else had changed. I sat up slowly. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot of the laundromat. There was a woman down there, folding clothes from a basket into the back of a station wagon. She was about my age. She looked tired. I thought for a moment about how many versions of me there were in this city, in this country, on this planet, women in their 30s who had been told their entire lives that they came second, that they were the difficult one, that they were the charity case. And I thought about my grandmother of mine, sitting in her green chair, recording that video 4 months before she died, knowing that one day a woman like me, just one woman in a long line of women who had been written off, was going to sit in a conference room and finally hear the words she had been waiting for her entire life. "You were never the charity case, you were the best of us." I sat down at my small kitchen table, and I started to make a list of all the things I needed to do next. The first week was the hardest. Not because of the family, although the family was a constant low-frequency hum of voicemails and text messages and emails. The first week was hard because I did not know how to be a person who had what I now had. I went to work the night of the will reading. I did not tell anyone what had happened. I clocked in at 7 p.m., took report from the day shift, did my rounds, hung the antibiotics, called the doctors when patients spiked fevers, comforted a woman whose husband had just had a stroke, and clocked out at 7:30 in the morning. I drove home, I slept. I went back the next night and did it again. I think a part of me believed that if I stopped working, the whole thing would turn out to be a dream. On Friday, 4 days after the will reading, Margaret called me. "Sutton, you do not have to keep working. You know that, right?" "I know." "Then why are you?" "Because I do not know what to do if I do not." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That is a very honest answer. Take your time. There is no rush, but I want you to start thinking about what you actually want. Not what is expected of you, what you want." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. The first big decision I made was to give notice at the hospital. I gave 6 weeks, which was more than required, because I loved my unit and I did not want to leave them in the lurch. I did not tell them why I was leaving. I just said that I had a family matter that was going to take up a lot of my time. The unit manager, a wonderful woman named Brenda who had been my mentor since 2017, hugged me and said she hoped I would come back someday. The second big decision was about the house. The house on Maplewood Drive was a 4-bedroom colonial that my grandparents had bought in 1972. It had 4 bedrooms, a finished basement, a screened porch on the back, a vegetable garden that my grandmother had tended until the year she got sick, and a kitchen with the same yellow tile from 1972. I had spent every other weekend of my childhood in that house. It smelled like cinnamon and old books and something else, something I could never quite identify, that just smelled like Grandma. I drove out there on the first Saturday after I gave notice. I parked in the driveway. I sat in the car for almost 20 minutes before I went inside. The house was exactly as she had left it. The bed was made. There was a half-empty cup of tea on the side table by her chair. Her reading glasses were folded neatly on top of a paperback novel she had not finished. The mail was piled up on the kitchen counter, mostly bills and a few sympathy cards. I walked through every room slowly. I touched the door frames. I sat on the edge of her bed. I opened the closet of hers and breathed in the smell of her clothes, the lavender sachets she kept in the drawers, the wool of her cardigans. I cried in her bathroom for about half an hour. Then I washed my face and went downstairs and made myself a cup of tea in her kitchen, using the same tea bag she had used, and I sat at her table and I drank it. I decided, sitting there, that I was going to move in, not right away, but eventually. I was going to live in her house, and I was going to keep the yellow tile, and I was going to plant the vegetable garden again in the spring. The third big decision was about the business. The 40% stake in Carlson and Brewer Specialty Foods was the largest financial piece of the inheritance, and it came with voting rights on the board. I knew nothing about running a specialty food company. I had never sat on a board in my life. I was a nurse. The only spreadsheets I had ever made were for tracking my own bills. I called Margaret. She arranged a meeting with the chief executive of the company, a man named James Carlson, who was the son of the original co-founder of the bakery business with my grandmother. He was 68 years old. We met at the office of the company in downtown Akron. He was a tall man with white hair and kind eyes. He stood up when I walked in. He shook my hand with both of his. "Sutton, I have heard so much about you," he said. "Your grandmother of yours talked about you constantly. I want you to know I am not surprised by the will. She told me last year that she was making changes. She did not give me details, but she told me to be ready to work with a new partner, and she told me that I would like working with you very much." I sat down across from him. "Mr. Carlson, I do not know anything about this business." "James, please." "James, I do not know anything." He smiled. "You know more than you think you do. You know how to listen. You know how to ask questions. You know how to work hard. Your grandmother told me about you. The way you handled her medical care, the way you organized her appointments, the way you advocated for her with the doctors. That is business, Sutton. That is exactly what business is. The food is just the product. The work is the same." I started going into the office 2 mornings a week. James assigned me a mentor, a woman named Priya who was the chief operating officer. She walked me through everything. The supply chain, the financials, the marketing, the regional expansion plans. I took notes by hand in a notebook because that was the only way my brain could process information. I asked questions that I was embarrassed to ask. Nobody laughed at me. They actually seemed to like that I was asking. I started to realize, slowly, that my grandmother had been right. I did know how to listen. I did know how to ask questions. And the more I learned, the more I started to enjoy it. In the meantime, the family kept calling. My mother left voicemails almost daily for the first 2 weeks. They progressed through several phases. Phase 1 was apology mixed with explanation. "Sutton, I am so sorry, but you have to understand the context. Your grandmother of yours was sick. She was not herself." Phase 2 was guilt. "Sutton, your sister is having a very hard time. She is in therapy. She is on medication. Please, as her sister of hers, please consider her well-being." Phase 3 was anger. "Sutton, I do not know who you are anymore. This is not the daughter I raised. I want you to know that you are tearing this family apart." Phase 4 was bargaining. "Sutton, we do not want a lot. Just enough to help Vanessa with her house, just a small portion. Family takes care of family." I did not respond to any of them. I saved them all in a folder on my phone. I did not know why. Maybe because Margaret had said that documentation mattered. Maybe because, after a lifetime of being told my memory was unreliable, I wanted to have a record. My father did not call. He sent me one text message on the second Saturday after the will reading. It said, "I am working on understanding things. I am sorry. I am here when you are ready, if you ever are." That was actually the message that broke me. I read it standing in the kitchen of my grandmother of mine, holding a cup of tea, and I cried for a long time. I did not respond to him either, not yet, but I did not delete it. Vanessa was the one who surprised me. For 3 weeks I heard nothing from her, nothing at all. I had expected screaming, threats, maybe legal action. I had expected her to be the loudest. Instead, she went silent. My mother mentioned her in voicemails. Vanessa is devastated. Vanessa is not eating. Vanessa cannot get out of bed. But Vanessa herself did not call, did not text, did not show up. Then, on a Tuesday in early April, I came home from a long day at the company office, and there was a small package on my doorstep. No return address. Just my name on the front in handwriting I knew. I brought it inside. I sat down on my couch. I opened it slowly. Inside, there was a single object. It was a small ceramic figurine of a girl in a blue dress, holding a basket of flowers. It was something my grandmother had kept on her dresser for as long as I could remember. I had played with it as a child. My grandmother of mine had told me, when I was about 10, that her own mother had given it to her when she was a little girl in 1942. It was one of her most treasured possessions. There was a note in the box, folded once. Vanessa had written it. "I took this when she went into the hospital the last time. I do not know why I took it. I think I took it because I wanted something of hers before she gave everything to you. She would have wanted you to have it. I am sorry. I do not expect you to forgive me. I do not even know if I am sorry for the right things yet, but I am sorry for taking this. V." I held the figurine in my hands for a long time. It was the first thing my sister had ever given me, in 34 years, that was not poisoned. I did not respond to the note right away. I needed to think about it. I put the figurine on my own dresser, next to a photo of my grandmother and me from my college graduation in 2014. In the photo, my grandmother was holding my arm with both of her hands and beaming up at me. I had been the first person in our family to finish a 4-year college degree. My parents had come too, but they had left early to take Vanessa to a brunch. My grandmother had stayed for the entire ceremony, then taken me out for dinner alone. I thought about Vanessa for a long time, about what it meant that she had sent the figurine back, about whether it was the beginning of something real or just another move in a long game. Margaret had given me some advice early on. She had said, "Do not trust people based on their words right now. Trust them based on their behavior over time. People in crisis often perform contrition before they perform change. The performance is not the change. Watch what they actually do." I decided to watch. In the meantime, the rest of my life kept moving. In late April, I officially moved into the house on Maplewood Drive. I did not bring much with me from my apartment. I brought my clothes, my books, my coffee mug from my grandmother of mine, and the ceramic figurine. Everything else I either gave away or threw out. I did not want to bring my old life into the new house. I wanted to start fresh. The house felt strange the first few nights. It was too big. It was too quiet. I had been used to the sound of the laundromat downstairs, the rumble of the dryers, the muffled conversations of customers. The house on Maplewood Drive was on a quiet street lined with old maple trees. At night, I could hear the wind. I could hear the house of mine settling. I could hear, sometimes, what sounded like footsteps upstairs, even when I knew I was alone. I started keeping a journal. Margaret had suggested it. She said that big life transitions deserve to be documented, not because you would forget them, but because the version of you who lived through them would be different from the version of you who would look back on them later. She said the journal was a way of leaving messages for your future self. The first entry was just 2 sentences. "I live in her house now. I do not know how to do this." The second entry, 2 days later, was longer. I wrote about waking up in her bed for the first time. I wrote about the way the morning light came through the east-facing window of the kitchen and made the yellow tile glow. I wrote about how I had made breakfast for myself, just toast and eggs, and how I had sat at the table eating, and how I had cried halfway through the eggs because I had remembered her sitting in that same chair, eating the same breakfast, every morning for almost 50 years. In early May, I had my first board meeting at the company. I had been preparing for weeks. Priya had walked me through every agenda item 3 times. I wore a navy blue dress and my grandmother of mine pearl earrings. I sat at a long conference table with 8 other people, most of them men in their 50s and 60s, and I did not say much for the first hour. I just listened. When it came time to vote on a proposal to expand into 2 new markets, I asked one question. It was about the projected operating costs for the first 18 months. The chief financial officer started to answer, and then stopped, and then admitted that the projection in the document was based on assumptions that he was no longer sure were accurate. The room got quiet. James Carlson, sitting 2 seats down from me, looked at me with what I can only describe as the look of a coach watching his rookie hit a triple in her first at bat. I think we should table this until the projection has been updated, I said. The board voted unanimously to table it. After the meeting, James walked me to the parking lot. Your grandmother of yours would have loved that, he said. I was scared the whole time. That is what your grandmother of yours used to say too. She used to tell me, James, I am scared at every single meeting. The day I stop being scared is the day I should retire. I drove home that night feeling something I had not felt in a long time. I felt useful in a way that was not about taking care of someone else. I felt useful in a way that was about my own brain, my own questions, my own choices. That same week, I got the first communication from a lawyer that was not Margaret. My mother and father had retained an attorney. He sent a letter to Margaret, formally requesting a meeting to discuss the possibility of an amicable resolution to the family of the estate dispute. He used a lot of words. The gist was that my parents wanted to sit down and talk about whether I might consider a voluntary distribution of some assets to other family members, in the spirit of family unity. Margaret forwarded me the letter with a single line at the top. Your call. I thought about it for 2 days. I called Margaret back. I will meet with them, I said, but on my terms, at your office, with you there, and not Vanessa, just my parents. Are you sure? No, but I want to do it anyway. I do not want to spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had refused to talk to them at all. I want to have said what I have to say. She set up the meeting for the following Thursday at 3 p.m. I spent the days leading up to it preparing. I made notes. I thought about what I wanted to say and what I wanted to avoid saying. I thought about what I wanted from this meeting, if anything. I realized, eventually, that what I wanted was not money related at all. I did not want them to get anything, and I was not going to give them anything. What I wanted was to say, out loud, in a room with witnesses, the things I had never been allowed to say before. I wanted my version of our family of mine history to be heard by them, not because I expected them to change, but because I deserved to stop carrying it alone. On Thursday, I drove to Margaret's office. I wore a black blazer over a white shirt. I did not wear the pearl earrings this time. I wore them when I felt like I needed my grandmother of mine with me. That day, I wanted to be on my own. My parents were already in the conference room when I arrived. So was a man in a suit I did not recognize, who introduced himself as their attorney, a Mr. Ramirez. My mother stood up when I walked in. She tried to hug me. I sidestepped it. I sat down across from her instead. Sutton, she said, sitting back down slowly. Thank you for coming. I am not staying long. I have something to say. Then I will hear what you have to say. Then I will leave. Mr. Ramirez started to speak. Miss Bruler, if I could just outline the family of the proposal. With respect, sir, I did not come here for a proposal. I came here to talk to my parents. If you want to listen, that is fine, but I am not negotiating today. Margaret made a small sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh, immediately suppressed. Mom, I said, Dad, I have spent my entire life trying to figure out what I did wrong. From the time I was about 5 years old, I knew that something was different about the way you treated me and the way you treated Vanessa. I thought it was something I had done. I thought I was less lovable. I thought I was too quiet, or too tall, or too plain, or not smart enough. I spent years trying to figure out the formula. If I just got better grades, if I just made more friends, if I just stopped needing things, then maybe you would love me the way you loved her. My father was looking at the table. My mother was looking at me. I want you to know that I have stopped trying. I stopped trying the day grandma of mine died, actually. The minute Vanessa called me a charity case in front of you, and you nodded and Dad looked away, I knew. I knew that there was no formula. I knew that the problem was never me. The problem was that you decided, a long time ago, that you only had room in your hearts for one daughter, and that daughter was not going to be me. My mother started to cry. I am not telling you this to hurt you. I am telling you this because I am done pretending I did not notice. I am done managing your feelings about my feelings. I am done shrinking myself so that you can be comfortable. Grandma saw me. She is the only person in this family who ever did. And she made sure, before she left, that I would have what I needed to never have to ask any of you for anything ever again. I want you to understand that. I am not going to give Vanessa money. I am not going to bail out your house. I am not going to fund her debt. I am not going to be the family of mine cash machine. If you came here hoping for that, the answer is no. The answer is going to be no every time you ask. My mother was crying harder now. My father had still not looked up from the table. That is not why we came, my mother said between breaths. Sutton, that is not why we came. Then why did you come? Because we want our daughter back, both of you. We want the family back. I looked at her for a long time. Mom, I said, you did not lose me. You never had me to begin with. You had a placeholder. You had a quiet girl who lived in your house and asked you for as little as possible because she had learned that asking led to disappointment. That is not a daughter. That is a tenant. She flinched. If you want a relationship with me now, it has to be a real one. Which means it has to start with you actually acknowledging what you did. Not in vague terms. Not in we both made mistakes language. Specifically, you favored her. You ignored me. You called me difficult when I was a child. You compared us at every birthday party, every report card, every holiday. You taught Vanessa that she was better than me, and you let her treat me accordingly for our entire lives. Dad, you watched it happen and you did nothing. Both of you are going to have to sit with that, out loud, in real words, if you want me to be in your life in any way. My father finally looked up. You are right, he said. The room was so quiet I almost missed the words. My mother asked what I said. He turned to her and agreed with me. He said he had not slept properly since the reading of the will. He realized they played favorites since the birth of Sutton. My mother stared at him. He said he was tired of lying and sitting in the corner while the women of his family tore each other apart. He was 63 years old and would start having a spine now. He turned to me and said he was not asking for forgiveness. He wanted to start showing up by calling and listening if I allowed it. I felt he was actually seeing me for the first time. I agreed to try. My mother stood and called it outrageous, saying he was taking my side. He replied he was taking responsibility. She complained about everything she had done for the family. He said she did everything for the family she wanted, not the one she had. He pointed out she spent the entire life of Vanessa telling her she was perfect, resulting in a 41-year-old woman who steals, lies, and cannot manage money. My mother sat down, looking smaller. The meeting went nowhere. Mr. Ramirez tried to discuss finances, but I refused. My mother tried to change the mind of my father, but he did not yield. I ended the meeting, telling my mother I would watch her actions over time instead of negotiating with words. I left the office and drove home, feeling clear for the first time in years. A week later, the sister of mine called. I almost did not answer, but remembered the advice of Margaret about watching behavior. She said she was in therapy for the first time. She admitted she sent back the figurine because she had to look at herself the way others saw her, and she did not like it. She confessed she had been awful to me our entire lives because the mother of us taught her to be the only one. She was crying genuinely. She explained she was not asking for money. She had confessed her debts to her husband. They were losing their house, filing for bankruptcy, and she was getting a real job because her marketing position was a lie. She told me this because the grandmother of us was right. She remembered the cruel words she said about my dress at her wedding in the year 2012. She apologized for being cruel and admitted the version of herself seen in the video was the real her. She asked if the grandmother of us really called me a charity case at the funeral. I confirmed she did. She repeated her apologies. I told her I did not know what I thought yet, but I was glad she was getting help. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table of the grandmother of mine. The summer of the year 2025 was beautiful. I planted a vegetable garden using the notes of my grandmother. I started spending more time at the company office, learning the business and managing projects. I kept working as a nurse on a different schedule, needing both the company and the hospital. The father of me started calling me every Sunday. Our conversations grew deeper, and he began seeing a counselor. The mother of me and I did not speak for 3 months until she sent a handwritten letter. She admitted she favored the sister of me every day of my childhood and apologized. I replied that I needed time. Vanessa and I did not become close, but we were not enemies. She filed for bankruptcy, moved to a small apartment, and got a normal job. She sent me occasional texts, and I responded sometimes. In August, on what would have been the 88th birthday of the grandmother of mine, I held a small dinner. James, Priya, Uncle Roland, Delphine, Margaret, Brenda, and the father of me attended. We ate at the dining table of the grandmother, sharing stories of her vibrant youth. I looked around the table and thought about how, just 6 months earlier, I was at a funeral being called a charity case. The same family that told me I was nothing had become this. A single Tuesday in March had ripped my old life apart and given me a new one. After everyone left, I sat on the screened porch with the lights off. The crickets were loud. The air smelled like cut grass and the last of the summer flowers. I thought about my grandmother of mine. I thought about the video. I thought about the way she had looked into the camera and said, "You are the best of us." I did not believe it yet. Not really. But I was starting to believe that she had believed it. And I was starting to believe that maybe, given time, I could see myself the way she had seen me. That, more than the house, more than the company, more than the money and the trust, was what she had given me. She had given me a mirror in which I was finally visible. After 34 years of being told I was a shadow, my grandmother of mine had handed me proof, in legal documents and video recordings and the certified words of an independent attorney, that I had always been a full person, in full color, deserving of a full place at the family of mine table. I am 34 years old. I run a household. I help manage a business worth millions of dollars. I am a nurse. I am a daughter who is rebuilding a relationship with her father from the ground up. I am a niece who calls her great-uncle every Sunday. I am, somehow, against every odd, slowly becoming a sister to a woman who once handed me a designer dress 2 sizes too small and laughed at me for crying about it. I am also, finally, a granddaughter who knows she was loved. If you are watching this and any part of it sounded familiar, if you grew up being told you were the difficult one, the quiet one, the difficult to love one, the charity case, I want to tell you something. The people who treated you that way were never describing you. They were describing themselves. They were telling you about the limits of their own hearts, not the limits of your worth. And one day, if you are very lucky, someone will see you the way my grandmother of mine saw me. Maybe it will be a grandmother. Maybe it will be a friend. Maybe it will be a stranger. Maybe, if no one else does it first, it will be you. You can be the one who finally sees yourself. You are not the charity case. You never were. If this story meant something to you, please give it a like and consider subscribing so more stories like this can find more people who need them. And if you have your own story, of being the overlooked one, the underestimated one, the one who finally found their worth, I would love to read it in the comments. We are all out here. We are all finding our way home, one Tuesday at a time.